amazing event. Okay, so before we start, I would like to introduce myself to you. My name is Revita Pirena Putri. I'm an undergraduate law student, and today I will be the moderator who will guide us today's discussion. I think we should be grateful, right? Because even though in this pandemic situation is not over yet, we can still learn and discuss together. And also, in this virtual class discussion, a special guest will give us an amazing topic, a new knowledge, and of course, there will be more insight that we could get. But before that, we will hear welcoming remarks from Ibu Wiwi Afifah as our head of law study. To Ibu Wiwi Afifah, the time is yours.
Thank you, Revita, as a moderator for the Human Rights Dialogue today. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we express our prayers and thanks to the Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Prayers and salutation for the best of Anbiya Nabi Muhammad and his family member and companion. It's our pleasure to welcome to you in the Human Rights Dialogue, especially for Mariam Zia. Hello, Mariam. Hello.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Nice to meet you, Mariam. It's so long not see you, and we never have a dialogue in this Zoom or maybe other platform. Today, we will dialogue about racial and gender discrimination, and we have a speaker, Maria, as a gender and development specialist, and all of us as students can ask something about how the racial discrimination and gender discrimination do by a government or maybe others like public and maybe like a terrorist, and maybe it helped by the maybe parent, friend, and others. So we have a Mariam Zia as speaker, and she will give you many information about what is the racial discrimination and gender discrimination, and all of us can ask something about this, and we can make the dialogue will active with your question. And thank you for Mariam and Revita. Wassalamualaikum
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Ibu Wiwi Afifah, for such a warm speech. So, without further ado, let me introduce you our amazing speaker, Mrs. Mariam Zia. Hello, Mrs. Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining with us today. It's such a great moment, right? Okay. She's a consultant of peace and justice, and now she will give us more insight and knowledge about racial and gender discrimination. And kindly reminder to all participants can ask some question and elaborate the topic after Mrs. Mariam finishing her presentation. For Mrs. Mariam, the time is yours.
Okay, I'm just going to open the presentation.
Sorry for interrupting you, Mariam. For students, if you have difficulties in English, you can ask with bahasa, or maybe you can ask by write in the chat box, or maybe Revita, me, Tanu, and others will translate you. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, now everyone can see the screen?
Yes, all right.
Okay. Assalamualaikum, selamat siang teman-teman. Apa kabar?
Alhamdulillah baik, Mariam.
Saya bisa berbicara bahasa Indonesia sedikit ya. Saya nama Mariam. Saya tinggal di Pakistan. Saya dari mana? Canada dan Pakistan. Saya dulu tinggal di Surabaya. Saya dulu bekerja di Untag. And now I will switch to English because my bahasa is not that good. So today, Ibu invited me to speak about the topic racial and gender discrimination. And this is for this human rights class. I am interested to speaking about this topic. I have studied international development in university in Canada, and I studied gender studies as well. And I got to work in Indonesia, in Untag, for 1 tahun, 1 year. Over there, I'm not sure if I met any of you all. Which year are you all in? Are you in first year, second year?
Second year in here.
Okay, yeah. So I think I was in Untag from 2018 to 2019. So I don't think you were all in university then. So I think I'm a little older than all of you. Okay, so I did Indonesia for 1 year, and then I came back to Pakistan, Asli Mana, Pakistan. But I grew up in Canada. And over here, I was working with different NGOs, so non-profit organizations. So they work for human rights. And I was working on specifically transgender rights. Does anyone, and I will ask some questions during the presentation, and at the end, we can have our question answer. Does anyone know who transgenders are? If anyone has an idea what the word apa itu transgender? Sorry, Ibu, your voice is very muffled. I can't hear you properly.
Okay. Can you hear my voice now?
Yeah.
I think it's good. So transgender is someone who identify their gender different than when she's birth, like when they're birth. So in our country, there's just two gender in if we are birth, like female and male. So if she is not that okay with that, not okay with that identification, she can change. I think that's what my mind is about transgender.
Yeah, bagus, betul. That is correct. Transgenders are people who maybe do not identify with the sex they were assigned with at birth. And so in Pakistan, it's very traditional. We have transgenders from a long time, and we are considered them as a third gender. Gender number tiga, yeah. Okay, so I was working over there. We were helping them out. I was doing research, and now that's a bit of a background of the work I kind of did around human rights. I worked on policy related to women rights as well. And now we're going to begin our discussion. If at any point you have questions, you can ask. But as Ibu said, we can also ask at the end of the session. Okay, so before we begin, we need to understand, before we can talk about apa itu diskriminasi, we need to understand what is gender, right? So gender talks about the social attributes that is associated with being male and female. So you may be born a female, but maybe you don't like girly things, you don't like the color pink, and that's not, you don't have to like any of those things, because that is made by society. It is socially constructed. That is what the word we use for it. And so gender sometimes tells us what we can and cannot do. And they add some stereotypes, as I said, to that if you're a woman, then you have to like cooking. But again, that's not true. But gender means how we kind of perform our identity, right? And we in society, we have allotted responsibilities and roles to those identities, as well as it affects the decision-making process in the household. For example, how many kids you want. Sometimes it's not the woman who decides who wants the kids, but it is also the men have a lot of control over that as well, just because they're a man. So I would say that gender is socially constructed of how you act out your identity. And it is different than sex. Sex is something that is assigned to you when you're born biologically. All right. Ada pertanyaan? If not, I'll just move on. Okay. So now we have to also understand what is race. So in this picture, you can see different types of race. I feel like Indonesians and myself, Pakistani, we fall under Asians, the broad category of Asia, because Pakistan is in South Asia, Indonesia, Southeast Asia. And then we have Africans from Africa. Caucasians are often people in North America or Europe, or they live in North America, but they have European roots. Then we have Hispanics who are South America. We also have Nordic, who are northern part of Europe, so Norway, for instance. Then again, Korean, Japanese falls under Southeast Asia, and Arab falls under Arab countries. So Dubai, Egypt, places like that. So those are some examples of race, but what is race by definition? It is a way to group humans together based on their mostly physical and social qualities. So obviously, as I mentioned, Asians, we all kind of look similar in some ways. The term came about to usually talk about the language. So for instance, a lot of Southeast Asian language is similar. So if you look at China, Japan, Korea, the language is actually very shared and similar. And I would say that in my language, Urdu, it is very similar to Al-Arabi, Arabic. And so that means that I had some history maybe with this kind of race. Maybe like we were, before Islam came to Pakistan, where I'm from, we were mostly Hindus, and then the Arabs came and they brought Islam, and that's how Pakistan became Muslim, for instance. And so a lot of scientists say that race is also not biological. This is like gender, a social construct that we humans have created by ourselves, and we've made rules in our society according to that. So I found that interesting because it is not something that's necessarily biological or scientific. Okay. So we have to understand also there is a difference between race and ethnicity. So as I said, race refers to physical differences, but ethnicity often means... Yes, sorry. Do you have a question? Okay, I'll keep going. So if we're talking about race, and you can see in this pie chart, you could say that white, Black, Asian, and Latin American are different races. But what is ethnicity? So I actually have an activity for you all. So ethnicity, by definition, first we'll understand it means we belong to the same culture. So you can be from the same country and have different ethnicities. So I'm from northern Pakistan, but I'm different than people from southern Pakistan. But I have somewhat similar language because we're in the same country and we are all Muslim, mostly majority Muslim country, just like a lot of you might dominate with Islam, and Christians and Hindus are a minority in Indonesia. So we're gonna do a little activity. Can someone tell me which ethnicity is this picture? You can just unmute your mic and say it.
It's Javanese.
Yeah. And they're from Java, right? That's, they're from Java and Bali mostly, and they are mostly Muslim, Hindu, Christians, right? Okay, and what about this one?
Sundanese
Yeah.
maybe.
Sundanese, yeah. So they are mostly, they're Muslim from West Java and Jakarta. If I'm wrong, do correct me because I am not Indonesian. Saya tidak orang Indonesia ya. Okay. And this one?
Batak maybe.
Batak. Yeah, Batak. Betul. So they are from North Sumatra.
Batak
And Batak. They're mostly Christians and they have some Muslims as well. And apa itu?
Sulawesi
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, Sulawesi. So this can be from Makassar, Minahasa, sorry, cannot pronounce properly, Bugis, Gorontalo, and places like that. Okay. And apa itu? Who are they? Where are they from? I'll give you a hint. It's near Surabaya.
Madura.
Yeah, betul. They are Maduri's people. I don't know why the picture is black and white. Okay, and this one?
Aceh.
Okay.
Palembang maybe.
Where were Batavia or Betawi people?
Yes, Betawi from Jakarta.
Okay. And they're mostly Muslims with a few Christians as well and Catholics as well. So, okay, yay. So everyone knows your ethnicities in Indonesia. Good. Now we're going to move towards the less fun part of the activity. We're going to talk about discrimination. Now, what exactly is discrimination? So, any idea that someone can say? What do you think is discrimination?
So discrimination is kind of some, unfair treatment for someone based on their gender, their ethnicity, or maybe some race, or even their skin color.
Yeah, very good. So discrimination is treating someone differently based on multiple factors. So one could be race, your class status, your gender, your age, your religion, as you saw, your ethnicity, your ability. So if you are disabled, your sexual orientation. And so the discrimination is that you're often faced, you're treated in a way which is much worse, and it affects you in a lot of ways. It can affect you professionally as well. Can someone tell me any form of discrimination that exists in Indonesia? So you saw all these ethnicities, for example. Do you think that there is discrimination between the ethnicities?
I think it is like it's really seen. Like I'm from Java, so my skin color is kind of like dark. So when I'm with my other ethnicity friends, like I've been moved to Banjar, and there the skin color is very white, like very milky white. So like they're pretty. I know, like, but it's not about our skin, but it is. But in social structure, it is like, so it's very clear that I'm from Javanese and I'm from Java, and they treat me differently.
Okay, thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry that you have to experience that. Does anyone else want to speak, or
Can I speak?
yes?
In my neighborhood, there's a Chinese,
Yeah.
and I'm Japanese, and there's a Chinese. Why does the Chinese group and Japanese group just never been together, like hang out together or talk together? Yes,
Okay.
that's it.
So you're saying the Chinese, they don't hang out with who? The Japanese?
Yes, Chinese only hang out with Chinese, and Japanese only hang out with Japanese.
Yeah. So that's definitely one of the big discriminations that exists in Indonesia is the Chinese discrimination that exists. And there's also one really big discrimination that no one has mentioned yet, the racial discrimination. I'll give you a hint. It starts with a P. One sort of ethnicity or one island of Indonesia where there is a lot of racism, discrimination. Which is that? It's on, if you keep going west, it's okay. It starts with a P and it ends with the A. So Papua. There's a lot of racism towards Papuan people, lots of discrimination. Does anyone agree? Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, can I say
Yeah.
something? Yeah,
Boleh.
I've ever experienced someone's, it's not mine, but someone's around me were joking about Black people, Papua. In elementary school, we usually call them like negro or pace. They usually call it pace, and they mock them.
Yeah, exactly. So Papuans face a lot of racial discrimination. You can call it ethnic, but like I went over the major ethnicities, I think some people will not consider necessarily Papuans an ethnicity. They think it's a different race. And there's a lot of tensions there. And we will talk about that in a bit more detail. So today you're going to learn about these kind of discrimination that exists. Not only I'll talk about Indonesia, but I'll talk also about my country, Pakistan. I will talk about America as well. Okay, very good. So now we're going to talk about what is gender discrimination. Now, all of you have given me examples of racial discrimination, but I think one of the biggest discrimination that exists is discrimination based on gender. So this means, again, same definition as discrimination, when you are kind of excluding someone or unfairly kind of judging someone based only on their gender. And this usually affects women. Sometimes it affects men as well, or gender minorities, like we talked a little bit about transgenders. So it really has effects for, let's take women, for example, because this can affect their getting job opportunities, getting paid equally as men, getting treated equally as men, and a lot of human rights issues. So for instance, sometimes just because you're a woman, you will not get the same pay as a man who has the same work experience. So same resume, just because there are some stereotypes we've made about women, just like there's stereotypes that we have made about Papuans, right? Or about maybe Chinese, Indonesians, or if you're from Java, you're like this. If you're from Sumatra, you're like this. And those stereotypes really harm us, because then we start thinking that this is how this person is and they cannot change, but that is not true. And so what issues do women face? And generally, not about Indonesia. Anyone can share. Maybe as women, you can share. And even as a man, you can tell if you ever faced discrimination, or did you ever discriminate towards a woman? And did you ever try to stand up for a woman who was facing any type of bullying, harassment? Will anyone want to share this? If you ever experience gender discrimination in your life.
Can I?
Yeah.
I have experienced that. First year in university, when I was wanted to be a leader of a team, but they don't let me to do it because just I'm a woman, and they prefer to choose a boy.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. That's one really the example that exists, I think, across the world. So a lot of times men do not want to give women what we say leadership positions, because they feel that a woman cannot lead as well as a man. So if you look at all of the top organizations in the world, the top NGOs, all of them, mostly they're led by men. And I remember when I was in Surabaya, I think the mayor, she was a woman. Is it still the same mayor? The mayor of Surabaya.
Not yet. I'm sorry. Ibu
Change right
Risma,
now.
yeah. She's now as head of a ministry of social ministry in Indonesia.
Okay.
Ibu Risma, yeah.
Okay, so she's not the mayor anymore. But okay, I do remember that she was at the time, and I thought that was really empowering. I think we need to, as men, some things that we can do to help with gender discrimination is that it's very small things. Honestly, we don't even pick them up because we're just raised this way. So for instance, someone gave the example that she wasn't made the team leader. So sometimes when we're in a group, there's men and there's women, and we just, as men, you should give space for the woman to speak. So a lot of times women have ideas or know more about a topic, but oftentimes a man will explain the topic more, or maybe talk over the woman. So if you see that happening, what you can do as an active member of society who wants to stop discrimination, whether it's big or small, is that just say to your friends, however you want to say, like, hey bro, like, let's listen to what she has to say, and just everyone kind of listen to the woman if she was not being heard. Now, this is just something small, but if I was to talk about something more heavy, would be if you see any form of harassment happening, street harassment happening to women. Has anyone ever tried to intervene or stop or tell their friend, hey, that's not okay, you shouldn't talk this way to a woman? Or I guess my question is maybe towards the men, like in this class, what can you do to be better towards your women friends and colleagues to make sure that gender discrimination doesn't happen? What can you do? Any male wants to speak? Any Ma?
I think mostly in our university, the female always speaking out. Like it's not we don't wait for no one. Like we always speaking out, and we have our own safe space. We create our own safe space, so we all can be a leader. So we all can be. And we have Ibu Wiwi here, and she always like encourage us. Oh, it's okay if even though you are a female, it's okay. Even though you are female, you can be a leader, like that.
Okay, so that's good to hear. I know that when I was even in UNTAG, Ibu Wiwi was very much involved on the gender side of things. We even worked together, I think, on the gender policy. Okay, so I'll just move forward. I don't think any of them, the boys spoke up yet. Okay, so other forms of gender discrimination, what can they be? So, and I'm gonna talk a bit more about this in the further slides. So one practice in Asia that happens a lot, both in Indonesia, also in Pakistan, is early marriage. So marriage, a woman gets married to someone when she's under 18, she's not an adult, and we call this child marriage. And this is also often forced marriage. So this is a form of gender discrimination where a woman is forcefully married to oftentimes an older man. And this is, of course, not right. I'm not sure if I don't think this happens in Indonesia, but one thing that happens in Pakistan is something we called forced conversions. So similar to Indonesia, like Hindus are a minority, and same in Pakistan, Hindus are a minority. But the issue is in some areas, some smaller village areas, rural areas, what some extremist Muslims have done is they get a woman from the village, and she's a Hindu maybe, then they forcibly convert her into a Muslim. And that is also a form of gender discrimination because they target the woman, and oftentimes younger women. So again, I talked a bit about harassment and sexual assaults. Those are forms of gender discrimination, 100%, because you are, again, you're using your power and you are discriminating against someone who is younger than, who is a woman, who is just a different gender. Then workplace harassment is very common towards women. It can be anything from your coworker making you feel uncomfortable to your coworker sending you text messages that he shouldn't be sending. So that is a form of harassment that a lot of women face. Cyber harassment also exists. A lot of women are bullied and harassed online through men mostly, who become their stalkers, which is a form of discrimination. As I mentioned earlier, stereotypes that exist about if you're a woman, then you should work in this department is also a form of gender discrimination. We don't think about it, but sometimes we're like, oh, because you're a woman, maybe you should become a teacher because that way you can come home early and take care of the kids. When in fact, what should we be doing is that we should have daycare in the school, for instance, so that woman can work as long as she needs and she has her child taken care of there. Sometimes when we are hiring someone and they are pregnant, for example, we do not hire them. Or if we know they're going to get married, or if they're going to get have a baby soon, that is a discrimination, which is actually illegal in a lot of countries. You can't not hire a woman because she's going to get married or she's going to have a baby, because that's going to, you think that's going to affect the performance of the company. But again, that is just a form of discrimination. And lastly, girls' education. So I'm not too sure about Indonesia, but in Pakistan, we have too many girls who are not going to school because of the cultural belief I think I was reading a little bit, this exists in some areas in Indonesia, but the belief that, oh, because you are a girl, you do not have to go to school, or you go to school maybe only until high school, or maybe only until college, then you stop, then you get married, then you be a good wife and you just do the cooking and the cleaning. So that is also a form of discrimination. You're stopping a woman and a girl from studying further, from achieving her dreams, just because she is a woman. All right. So we talked generally about discrimination. Just to give you a quick introduction of racial discrimination is, and we talked about this, it's when you treat someone unfairly and do not give them the same opportunities because of the color of their skin, where they were born, their ethnic origin, or their race. All right. So now I'm going to talk specifically about Pakistan. I know I gave some examples already, but in Pakistan, we have 22 million million children who are out of school, and majority of them are girls. And I did talk about the cultural issues, cultural reasons that exist, that why we don't like these girls to go to school. But just to elaborate, a lot of times we think that if a girl goes to school and she grows up, she gets very educated and maybe liberal and open-minded. And one of the biggest things that a lot of times men do not want women to have, because they want to control women, is financial independence. So once you go to school, you get a good job, you're able to support yourself, and you don't have to depend on your family. And if you're not depending on your family, you don't have to listen to things they're saying. For example, if your family is forcing you that you need to get married, you can just say, I don't want to get married, and move to your apartment and live the life that you want to live, for example, because you have financial independence. Now, obviously, financial independence is good, because I think everyone should pay for themselves. But a lot of times they want to be controlled. Men want to control women and tell them what to do. So they do not like this sort of independence that they get. And so I sort of talked over here about the cultural reasons that women should not work outside the home or go to school. It's very similar to why they should not work. A lot of men sometimes think that if they go and they're hanging out with other men, that, you know, there can be issues with relationships before marriage, for instance. But I think this is all about how much you should trust the other person. But before I go further, I do want to explain one thing, which is called something we say that's intersection. So we're talking about discrimination, and we're talking about two types of discrimination: gender and racial. So sometimes you can face both kinds of discrimination. So for example, I'll talk about this when I talk about America, but so for example, if I take myself, I am a woman and I am a Pakistani woman, which means I am a person of color. So in America, one of the big issues is, well, sexism still exists everywhere in the world, even if it's a more progressive country. But the other thing is, you can face racial discrimination. So as you know, after 9/11, a lot of immigrants who are Muslim, who were South Asian, they faced a lot of discrimination, and they still do to this day. Because as you must know, living in Indonesia, but being aware of what's happening in the world, that sometimes you are, people think that Muslims are terrorists just because of one thing that happened in 2001, which was so long ago. And what did America do in return? It completely destabilized the Middle East. So it's important to understand that there's different types of discrimination. So I can face gender discrimination and racial discrimination and class discrimination. So it makes me much more marginalized, which means much more sort of disadvantaged. All right, and I'll talk a bit more about the racial discrimination. So yeah, One of the discrimination was when you go to not let a girl go to school. Then the other is that you don't want her to work outside the home. And the other thing I guess I mentioned in Pakistan that exists is that, okay, if you want to work and you're a woman, then maybe, for example, be a teacher. So that way you come home early, things like that. And there's also a lot of violence that exists against transgender people, even though they have strong historical roots in Pakistan. And they were considered very high up, but because the British came and they colonized us, they brought in certain ideas that we kind of stuck with us. Again, early enforced marriage. And one big thing, or two big things that happen in South Asia a little bit that I don't think this happens that much at all in Indonesia. So it's good to know that Indonesia is a bit more progressive in their women rights. Is in Pakistan, sometimes women are thrown acid on their face, and then their face just becomes distorted. And a lot of times it's from a man who has an issue with him. Women have even been thrown acid on their face for just being beautiful or pretty, and that their brother is worried that other men will look at them. Or if they were talking to a boy who wanted to marry them and she couldn't marry them, he would just throw acid on her face. So this is a horrible practice that happens. It still happens in Pakistan. It's not reported as much, but a woman made a documentary about this, and now there's actually a law that talks about if you have acid thrown on your face, what kind of measures can you take. So talking about these issues is important because you can actually bring change to society. Another thing that happens is something we call honor killing. I'm not sure if you know about this, but in Pakistan and these countries like Afghanistan sometimes, as well as some countries in the Middle East, if you are a woman who dishonored your family, and that can be in any way. For example, if you had a relationship with a boy and you're a Muslim woman and you're not supposed to, in some small rural areas and villages, women have been killed because of something small that they did like that. Because the family, usually the father or the husband or the brother, feels like the woman has dishonored the family. Because for some reason, we have put honor into women. Why are women the protectors of honor in society? Men are also we should all be honorable, but we shouldn't be killed for something that we did. That could be a mistake, or no one deserves to die, basically. Another interesting thing is malnutrition. So in some countries, in some areas, women are actually given less food because they think that women won't grow as strong, don't need to grow as strong as, for example, their brothers, for instance. And let's move on to racial discrimination in Pakistan. So this on the right is just a picture of a ethnicity in northern Pakistan, very different than when you think of typical Pakistan. But Pakistan also has many different ethnicities. We have a few different provinces, not as big as Indonesia, but again, different culture and history. And some racial discrimination, I'll talk in the America section, exists much more in America than Pakistan. But maybe this exists in Indonesia too, is that you don't hire someone based on their ethnicity. So if someone is in America, sometimes if you're Black, you face that issue. Maybe in Indonesia, maybe someone can tell me about this, but is the discrimination so big that you won't hire someone who's from Papua, maybe, or someone, someone from Sulawesi and Java. Is that something that exists in Indonesia, is my question? That you will not hire someone, or you will discriminate someone so much that during the hiring process, you won't hire someone from a certain ethnicity, for example, Papua. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Or is that true? Is that something that happens?
Silakan, Mbak Moderator atau mahasiswa, mungkin kalau ada bisa menyampaikan terkait dengan diskriminasi yang ada mungkin di daerahnya, baik yang kamu alami atau mungkin orang lain alami dan kamu ketahui, silakan. Apakah diskriminasi misalkan terkait dengan etnis di tempatmu, mungkin yang Madura atau mungkin yang dari Medan ya?
Can I answer?
Yeah.
People scared about Muslim women. They're using a veil because people think that since May 2018, I guess the Muslim woman Muslim families bombing the church. I think my friends know the news already. Knew the news, yeah. People think that Muslim woman that using a veil is a terrorist. I think it's a discrimination.
Yeah. Makasih. That's very true.
Sama.
For a lot of Muslims in general. But I'm glad you talked a little bit more about Muslim women, because even in America, this is really big, that if you are a woman who takes hijab, who even takes niqab, you can face not only sexism, then gender discrimination, but also racial discrimination. Because you are a Muslim, they would think that, oh, you're dangerous, you're a terrorist. And it's really unfortunate that the bombings happened to minorities, even in Pakistan. So as you know, majority of Muslims are Sunni, right? And in Pakistan, Shias are a minority. And then we have different Muslim sects. So for example, Ismaili is one of them, Ahmadi is one of them, who are often not considered Muslim. Then you have Christians and Hindus. So even in Pakistan, I was gonna just talk about that. So thanks for bringing that up. There have been forced killings on people of different ethnicities and religions. So for example, I wrote Hazara Shias. So Shia, as you know, is a different sect of Islam. And then Hazaras are people who are originally from Afghanistan. And then they moved to Pakistan because we let in a lot of Afghani refugees. And a lot of extremist Sunni Muslim groups believe that we need to ethnically cleanse our sort of population, and we cannot have people from different ethnicities or Shias to influence Islam in Pakistan because they think it is wrong. And so they've been targeted and killed. Not only that, I mentioned forced conversions. Minorities in Pakistan have been forcibly converted. And there's also a lot of forced disappearances, which means a lot of kidnappings of people just because of their different ethnicity and stereotypes and thoughts that they are dangerous. And things like that. And in Pakistan and India, we have this thing called caste-based discrimination, which means you can, I am from the province of Punjab, but I have a different caste. Caste means my tribe name or my tribe background. I'm not sure if you have that in Indonesia, but you have a lot of different ethnicities. So there's a lot of discrimination on that too. Like you can all be from the same province, but you are different because of your family background, family tribe name. So that's also one discrimination that exists. I mentioned a little bit about Afghani refugees. So they are also faced some discrimination in Pakistan because they often had to live in poor conditions. This was during the war on Afghanistan, and then they moved here as refugees. And also we have different provinces in Pakistan, so we have discrimination there as well. So although our constitution says that all citizens are equal before the law and are entitled to equal protection, yet I think all constitutions in different countries say that, but we don't really follow, do we, now, if we have all these issues going on. All right, so now we're going to move on towards Indonesia. So gender discrimination in Indonesia exists in many different ways. We talked generally, we talked about Pakistan, but what is specific in Indonesia is, and this again is very similar to Pakistan because of Muslim countries. So inheritance laws discriminate against women. And this is obviously always up for debate because it is in accordance to Islamic principles. And in Islamic principles, it is different in the way that women get property as opposed to men. And a lot of people oppose that, or there's a lot of cultural issues in Pakistan. A lot of fights actually happen between siblings, brothers and sisters, because of how will they get the property when their parent passes away. Because men are supposed to get more property, women are supposed to get less because women get from their husband. So that is something that has been heavily debated. How about in Indonesia? Does someone want to tell me about in Indonesia, if they know anything about the property law or the inheritance law in Indonesia? Is it a problem? Do women get less property? Is there issues with getting property? Anyone want to share?
Silahkan yang mau sharing kalau ada masalah di hukum waris atau hukum perdata yang terkait dengan harta benda, boleh silahkan. Yang terkait dengan diskriminasi.
Maybe I can share with you, Miss. So like in Indonesia, we use like Islamic law, right? So in Islam, as we know, a woman get less inheritance, less property than men. So it's kind of annoying for me, but sometimes when I spoke that out in academic forum, it will be like, oh, it is how Islam, like it is how our law in Islam. So like I can do anything about it, but like honestly, we all have like equal property, equal rights to our property, like that.
Okay. So you think that we do get equal rights in accordance to the law, right? Is that that's what you meant, right? Okay. All right. So yeah, that is something that people have different opinions on. Other than that, are there laws? You are all human rights students, lawyer students. Are there laws in Indonesia that protect harassment and domestic violence? I was actually reading that there is a new law in Indonesia where they have defined 9 different types of harassment. So that's a really good progress. Does anyone know that if there's laws that protect women against harassment and if they actually work? No.
There is no law protects us from any violence. Like if someone call out us in street, there's no law that protect us with that kind of act. There's still a lot of debate whether that law, that rancangan undang-undang, is going to be applied or not, because it is not Islamic way of it. This law is against Islam. As we all know, like our country is like a lot of Muslim in it, so there's a lot of debate about it. But but that's our rights as a woman here to get protected or from violence, from small things, small violence like men calls us out in street, but there's no protection about that in here yet.
Yeah, you're very right. I think that there should be a law though that works on harassment. Maybe we could talk about that, because I think every country does have a protection against harassment law. Then there's a separate debate about if it's being implemented, if it's being applied or not, right? Because that's a major issue. Sometimes the laws exist, but it's not being implemented. That happens in Pakistan as well. Okay, and so another statistic, which is actually a global statistic, but it's also very true to Indonesia, is that 1 in 3 women have reported sexual harassment of some kind. So this is actually something universal. This is a form of discrimination in which women have faced harassment or violence or assault. It can be anything from sexist jokes, cyberbullying, harassment to the workplace, to actual physical sexual assault. Another form of discrimination in Indonesia is that the female labor force participation was 51%, whereas men were participating in the labor force, 80% of them. So a lot of women weren't actively participating in the workforce, again, because of a lot of things we discussed, like cultural factors. One thing when I was living in Indonesia that I found interesting, that's not very much in Pakistan, and I would say it's a good thing in Indonesia, is that all of you girls and women were on your motorcycles and going from place to place. And I know that there were some stories, some stories of harassment, but mostly it is acceptable and okay for women to go out on their motorcycle, right? Maybe you just have to be home at a specific time because it's not safe. But I thought that was very empowering, because in Pakistan, that's not the case. Women do not go on motorcycles. It depends of your class status. So if you're upper class, you go in a car. If you're middle class, you might go on the bus, where there's also many forms of harassment. And if you're a lower class, you might have to even walk or have someone drive you. It's now slowly women are going on bikes more, but I think this is a very cool thing that's happening in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, Vietnam, but especially Indonesia, because they're Muslim women, and a lot of people, I think, had stereotypes that, oh, Muslim women are allowed to ride motorcycles. So I know you might not think about this as much as in Indonesians, you might think it's normal, but it's actually, I would say, a very interesting sign of progress. Also in Indonesia, women earn 23% less than men. So that's 20% that's less than men. Similar to Pakistan, less girls are enrolled in schools and rural areas. And gender-based violence happens, as well as a lot of child marriages. Excuse me. So we talked a little bit about sort of racial discrimination in Indonesia. Can anyone tell me where this picture is from? Does anyone know where this picture, what this picture is, where it was taken, what's happening?
It is kind of like when Papuan speaking out about what is their rights, like, and police here like kind of you know, like persecute them. And I think it happens in Surabaya also, like a lot of Papuan student got discriminated, and the police is not helping at all. The police persecute them, not helping them.
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. This picture was, I think, in the protest in Surabaya, where police arrested 43 Papuan students for disrespecting the Indonesian flag. And that is when I think the hashtag Papua Lives Matter started, because it is very similar to what was happening in America in terms of racial discrimination. So yeah, like in the beginning, I asked you what kind of discrimination exists in Indonesia, racial, and you did say, people said Papuan, people said we say certain names to Papuans. So when I was researching, yes, they are told that they are dogs or monkeys, which is a very horrible way of racial discrimination, to belittle someone, to call them that. And that is something that exists in Indonesia still. And apart from that, the stereotypes, what are the stereotypes about Papuans? Can someone tell me that? Like, what do majority Indonesians think? Oh, Papuans are like this is why we shouldn't be friends with them, or Papuans are like this, so we shouldn't hire them. What is the stereotypes? Is it that they like to fight a lot, or that they look, or is it just their skin color? Can you tell me some other stereotypes that you have about Papuans, like about their maybe personality that exists? Maybe someone who hasn't spoken yet can speak. Because there's...
Silakan yang mau sharing. Diskriminasi yang ada di Indonesia mungkin terkait ras dan lain-lain, boleh disampaikan contoh kasusnya, boleh. Yang belum bicara, silahkan. Revita, you like to ask something or maybe say something?
Okay, maybe some stereotype that Papuan people is considered as a criminal, and what else? Dark colors, maybe something like that.
Okay, so very similar to in America, how white people see Black people. They're criminals, they are troublemakers, and I'll talk about America in a second, which is actually very closely linked to Papuans. And you already talked about Chinese facing discrimination in Indonesia as well. This, I do want everyone to know, this is a safe space. You can come up and tell me your experience of discrimination. I think we should all not judge each other. If anyone would like to speak about discrimination they felt as a Chinese, they can certainly speak up. Not forcing anyone to do that, but if they're comfortable and brave enough, I would appreciate that as well. So yeah, a lot of Chinese people do face discrimination as well. Can someone, I did read a bit about this, but can someone tell me why majority Indonesians, excuse me, discriminate against Chinese? Yes, please. Does someone want to say something? Yes. I cannot hear.
Silakan, mungkin dari teman-teman ada yang mau mencoba untuk menjawab. Ya, persilakan.
Pertanyaannya apa tadi? I'm sorry. So, Maria, can you repeat the question? Can't get really.
So, can anyone share a story if they faced any discrimination because maybe they were Chinese, or if their friend faced any discrimination because of being Chinese? Chinese Indonesian. Or it's okay, you don't have to share the story right now. We can have a discussion at the end too. Did you have something to say? Sorry.
Yeah. Is it only the Chinese people who receive discrimination? Maybe in government sector, many example like Basuki Cahaya Purnama, the people say Ahok, cannot reach the higher level of.
Sorry, I don't think we hear you clearly. Do you mind putting the phone closer to your mic? Or maybe you can text the answer to a.
Yes, hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I think in Indonesia, many examples show us that
Louder, please.
yeah, Indonesia, we can see many examples that Chinese people cannot lead as a chief of a city.
Tanu, sorry for interrupt you, but we can hear your voice, Tanu.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually hard to hear you. Do you mind maybe texting, sending me a message in English, or you can send it to Ibu Wiwik in Bahasa and Ibu Wiwik can.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so maybe he will share later what Chinese discrimination he's maybe experienced. But these are the major forms of discrimination in Indonesia. If I missed any, does anyone have anything to add? Like I mostly talked about Chinese and Papua. But maybe like in the beginning, I talked about Sulawesi and Madura. So are there also stereotypes and discrimination between those ethnicities? And has anyone experienced them? So if you're from Java, did you ever actively participate in discriminating someone? Maybe when you were younger and you didn't know. Would anyone like to share?
Okay, can I share my experience?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm gonna share my experience. For information that I'm originally Indonesian, and my dad is Javanese, and my mom is Sundanese. But a lot of people who haven't met me before, they think that I am Chinese. This is the fun thing. I don't mind if everybody calls me Chinese, but from some people, I mean, like if you call me in Indonesian, a lot of people have a discrimination. Like some people call it Indonesian or pribumi, and some people call a person like look like Chinese, like Cina gitu, right? Nah, I was born in environmental a lot of Chinese people, and I mean like not originally Chinese, but people from Indonesian, but they look like Chinese.
Yeah.
Okay, so my experience is in Indonesia, the discrimination about Chinese and pribumi still exists, and I think it's totally bad because we are Indonesian, so we don't need to. I mean, like we don't need to have discrimination about who is better than Indonesian or Chinese in here. We are Indonesian. I mean, like the discrimination of between racism is not good here, Mariam.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point, that even though you're not Chinese, you've still faced sometimes discrimination of that sort. And even if you are Chinese, that doesn't mean that you're not Indonesian, right? We're all Indonesians. Papuans are also Indonesians as well. Yet there's still so much discrimination based on, again, physical appearance, like I mentioned, skin color, which is the part of race that people discriminate against. So thank you for sharing. All right, so now we're gonna quickly move on towards America, and then I want to end and open the floor for discussion and questions. All right, so obviously we all think America is a great country and everything's happening in America. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but that's not entirely true. There's a lot of gender discrimination in America too. There's a lot of sexism in America. 42% of working women in America say that they face discrimination on their job because of their gender. So even though, yes, there's more women working, like let's say 50% of the population is men, 50% is women. We have 42% of women working, which is good, but they're facing discrimination. So we are allowing women to enter the workforce, but we are not having an environment where we can respect them. And again, these are not just women, these can also be gender and sexual minorities like transgenders as well as even men and boys. So none of the boys actually shared when I asked about gender discrimination, because you might not have felt it, but I've known many men and boys who maybe if they're a little bit more like feminine, maybe they face discrimination similar to women just because of that. And that shouldn't be the case, because some women are more masculine, some men are more feminine, and that's totally okay. Like, we were made this way, God made us this way. Furthermore, 24% of CEOs in the US were women, and they earned 74% as much as male CEOs, which means not 100%. Like I said earlier, and someone here gave the example of in a club, they weren't given a leader position. So similar in America, we do not have a lot of women still in the leadership positions, in the decision-making positions. That's why I was really impressed that the mayor of Surabaya is a woman, and that's great, because the thing is, when you have more women in these top positions, then they will make important decisions for women. So for example, someone mentioned that the harassment law isn't properly enacted here. So if you have women in the parliament, which Indonesia does, I believe there's 30 to 40% women in the parliament, then there can be much more decisions made for women. And then one other thing you have in America, as I mentioned about my experience also sometimes in Canada and America, is not only am I a woman, but I am a woman of color. So a lot of women face that issue. Whereas in Indonesia, okay, like if you are Javanese or Sundanese, that's okay, because you're still Indonesian at the end of the day. But if you go to America and you are competing with someone who is white, maybe they will get better opportunities than you. So that's a whole other kind of issues that we have when we go abroad, where that's why people sometimes like to stay in their country, because they do not want to be treated like second-class citizens. And domestic violence is also very common in America still. In fact, it went up during COVID. And lastly, racial discrimination in America includes Black Lives Matter, which is very similar to Papuan Lives Matter. Well, Papuan Lives Matter was influenced by Black Lives Matter. I mentioned 9/11, and a lot of Muslims face discrimination because of that, because of a few bad eggs. They were stereotyped totally. Racial profiling is very common in America. If you are a Muslim man and you have a beard and you're trying to enter America and say your name is Muhammad Bilal Khan, then you will be stopped because your name sounds very Muslim, and they will question you a lot about what does your family do, what do you do, to see if you have any involvement with the act of 2001 that happened, the Twin Towers incident. Even racial discrimination happens to the extent where you get paid less because of being Black or brown. And I think we're running short of time. So I wanted to ask you all if you had any questions. Ibu, we have time until 2 minutes, I think. Yeah. So, okay, now I just want to open the floor quickly for discussion. I know I was trying to be interactive during the session, but any questions, any comments that you would all like to talk about, maybe? Ada bertanya. I know my Indonesian is not good, but.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Mariam Zia, for the amazing topic. And now we will move to the Q&A session. If the participant want to ask some question and elaborate the topic, you guys can use raise button or typing at the chat section. Mungkin ada teman-teman yang mau menanyakan terkait dengan materi yang sudah disampaikan, bisa raise hand atau chat yang ada di kolom chat. Saya persilakan.
Any questions or comments?
Okay, mungkin Maria Afifa.
Okay. Hello. Okay, can I? Excuse me, I'm Afifa. I want to ask something about the policy. I can't know if you're from Pakistan and we're from Indonesia. I want to know our policy about protecting women or victims are low, are weak. And how about in Pakistan? And how about the protection there? And is there any movements that we can adopt here to make that decrease or something like?
Yeah, thanks for your question. And so I know I mentioned earlier.
Question. Mrs. Mariam, do you want to answer it right now, or we wait till 2 or 3 questions more?
Okay, maybe we'll entertain 1 or 2 more questions and then I'll try to answer together.
Okay. So for Mr. Tanu Iswantono. You wanna ask some question?
Does anyone have any other questions? Anything at all related to the presentation?
I think, Revita, you can see the message from Tanu in the chat box.
Oh, okay. I will read it for you, Miss. This is from Mr. Tanu Iswantono. I'm not sure the data that you show in the presentation slides, which tell the number of women participation in school, especially in rural areas, is the example of gender discrimination. Every people can earn some chance to study, even poor or living far away from the cities. If there is any woman who don't go to school, usually cause of choices. They want to get the money, nor the family or government forbid them to study. So I think in Indonesia, gender discrimination, to get knowledge from school, whom the only man can do is not exist anymore. So that.
All right. Maybe one of the girls in the class can answer that question better than me. Do you think?
Yes, maybe I can help Miss Mariam answer that question.
Yeah.
So, in my experience, there's a lot of girls in my age that can go to school because their parents force them to marriage. It's not happens just in rural area. It is sad, but it's not just happen in rural area. It's happened in the city, even in Surabaya. And it's not about how they don't have the money for the school. No, but they don't have the opportunity to go to school. They don't have, and people discriminate them if they go to school. Oh, you're too old to go to school. It's time for you to get a family, to get a job. Oh, it's time for you to have a child, because this is how society wants you. Society wants women to have a child to just in home and take care of everything, and not in school. Even in university, there's not a lot of women can attend university, not because of the money. I get it. Like I have a scholarship. I'm thankful for that. I have privilege to have a scholarship, but there's a lot of women in my village, in my even in like really in my family that can go to school because they just don't have the opportunity, not just about the money or government funding it like that. Thank you.
Yes, I think very well said. I think you answered all the questions. I wanted someone from class to answer and comment back on that because you can better speak for Indonesia, but I 100% agree. I think that a lot of times in rural areas, yes, there's issues with money, but even as she mentioned, in urban areas, people who do have the privilege are still told, okay, no, don't study further, you have to get married. So I also understand that some families cannot put their kids in school because they have to earn money. But then again, that's called child labor, and that shouldn't be allowed either. Because if you are having a kid, I feel like you should be prepared that your kid is coming and you need to give them education so that they can become something in the future, which doesn't happen. And the statistic I pulled out from an Indonesian website about the percentage. So if you are interested, the person who asked the question, you can email me and I can send you the link as well. Anyone, I gave my information here. So if you have any questions or you want to discuss more things with me. Do we have time for more questions or should I answer the initial question I had? There was a small question about Pakistan.
Maybe you can answer the question from Ms. Ria Afifa that has already. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good question. Thank you. And I know I mentioned earlier that actually I think Indonesia is a bit more progressive with women because, like I mentioned, the motorcycle example. So I'm happy that you're asking about Pakistan. And I don't want to compare which countries are doing better in terms of gender equality because both countries are doing good in terms of the way they're progressing, but both countries also need a lot to improve upon. So yes, there are a lot of laws in Pakistan to ensure that harassment doesn't happen. There's the harassment of women at the workplace law, there's the domestic violence law, there's anti-child marriage law. Again, the thing is, okay, it's great these laws are there, but there is still issues with the implementation, right? And in terms of movements in Pakistan, yeah, so we do have on International Women's Day, we have our Women's March every year. And I'm not sure if you do that in Indonesia. This is in March that happens. But that is something that the whole world does. Does Indonesia have a march during International Women's Day? Like a protest march? Yeah. Okay, so do you guys go to the march? Have you gone to the march?
Yes, we have woman march in 1 March. It's also in 1 March.
Is it Kartini Day? There's Kartini, right? She has a day as well.
Yes, Hari Kartini and also Hari Ibu. And Women's Day also in Indonesia, National Women's Day is different, I think, with International Women's Day.
Okay, good.
So I just want to add the Mifta about the Women's March, right?
Yeah.
I think it's an international celebration about the human rights of women. It's an International Women's Day at the March. So every women in many countries celebrate the March as an International Women's Day, and they usually make a march Jadi maksudnya itu dilakukan di bulan Maret, bentuknya adalah march seperti apa sih, kalau di kita mungkin modelnya kayak karnaval, kayak beriringan banyak kayak gitu loh kegiatannya, makanya namanya march. Jadi Women March itu tidak hanya tentang bulan Maret, tapi metodenya yang juga banyak sekali kegiatan beriringan kayak gitu. And in the International Women's Day, we know it's not about the women participation or women empowering, but it's about the political right for women, and then like right for the labor women and etc. Jadi itu peringatan internasional Hari Perempuan Internasional itu sesungguhnya awalnya dicetuskan itu oleh para buruh perempuan yang kemudian itu merambat pada hak-hak lainnya termasuk hak politik. Nah, jadi mahasiswa bisa nanti baca sejarahnya Hari Perempuan Internasional. So I think student can read the history of International Women's Day that usually celebrate as a Women March.
Very well said, Ibu. Exactly. International Women's Day happens every year, and people around the world celebrate it, and it's a march in March. Also, I think I didn't get to speak to a lot of students, and I think we're running out of time because I did want to do an icebreaker activity, but the time is over, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to discuss more and deeper, of course, about this topic. But all good things must come to an end, and in this virtual class today, I will read the summary that we have our social construct as part of our identity, such as gender, race, and ethnicity. And sometimes we will experience discrimination. Discrimination is an unfair treatment based on the social construct. Above one of those is gender discrimination. Gender discrimination happens in every form, from one of participants who being stopped as a leader, who being judged when they spoke out. But it's not just in Indonesia, but this kind of discrimination happens globally in Pakistan. As Mrs. Mariam said, women is going through a lot of discrimination, such as forced marriage, violence, even acid throwing that makes me shocked. In Indonesia, there are so many laws discriminate about women, and in this discussion, Mrs. Mariam also shared about gender discrimination in USA, how she got discriminated as of people color, and we all agree that this must be eliminated. So, and also I would like to express my greatest gratitude to Mrs. Mariam, and also thank you for giving us this privilege to learn, to interact and discuss with you. It's such an honor, and I hope we can meet again in the next event or discussion forum. Thank you so much, Mrs. Mariam Zia. With that, I say my goodbye and close this discussion. Thank you for all the participants who already had us from the beginning. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a nice day and stay safe. Thank you.
Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you, terima kasih Mariam. Saya juga izin karena ada acara. Mahasiswa bisa mengisi absen yang sudah dituliskan di chat box ya. Terima kasih.
It's really fun to have a discussion with you.
Thank you, Miss Mariam. And thank you, Mbak Revita.
Guys,
Thank you, Miss. I hope I will see you soon.
Sampai jumpa lagi.
Sampai jumpa. I hope we can have a lot of discussion later.
Yeah, okay, I'll tell Ibu Wiwi to have another session as well. Okay.
Bye. See you. Mbak,